Hello all and welcome to this. I don't know how long of a video this will be. I might just start rambling, so we will see. I have an idea in my head. Of course, I never write anything down, so it's usually just me just kind of just a lot of free thoughts. So, but was thinking about this, so I thought I would come on here and tell a story. Story time is always a good time. So, once many moons ago, um, you know, I grew up loving pro wrestling. If you come across this channel or whatever, you don't know the story. When I was probably 3 or 4, on Sundays, if I was home on Sunday mornings, because often I would stay the night with either of my two sets of grandparents, and then go to church with them Sunday morning. But if I didn't and I stayed home, me and my dad would watch wrestling here in Kansas City, where I was raised and where I now live. So we would watch it. Didn't know at the time that apparently it was like the shits, but hey, you learn that later, right? But so kind of went from there. And then when Vince McMahon did his massive expansion, I was of that age, and so like Hulk Hogan, I was into Hulk Hogan, but I wasn't like the biggest Hulk Hogan fan. But not just him, but Ricky Steamboat, and who else was I like? I liked Macho Man Randy Savage, even though he was a heel. I liked Jake Roberts, even though he was a heel for most of the time. But yeah, I really liked pro wrestling, and then as I grew up, I never really got, it never. I was kind of made a fan for life, and like a lot of people of that era, there came a time in the early '90s, early mid '90s, when wrestling was really bad. Here in the U.S., WWE was the shits, and WCW was even more the shits. Believe it or not, it was really, really crappy. And at the same time, my dad, even though my dad was basically in salvage for most of his life, and even though he was just in salvage, if you understand kind of what that means, he was always kind of a techie in some ways. Like he was always like we had we were like one of the first people I knew, even though we weren't like rich, or even I would say we were just kind of middle class, that had like a video game system, because my dad liked that sort of stuff. He liked that techies type stuff. And when the internet kind of became a little bit more accessible, and I was still living at home and going to college, we got the internet, right? I guess it was before that. I guess it had been like '92 is when we probably first got the internet. So I was probably like 18. I was like a senior in high school, and so I started, like everybody else, started exploring. You start looking at the stuff you really liked. So for me, it was like comic books and other stuff, but it was also pro wrestling, even though I was kind of drifting out of pro wrestling at the time. But through that, and through a lot of other things, eventually, I really got into pro wrestling, because even though WCW and WWF were really bad at the time, I got into tape trading, right? And I shouldn't say tape trading, because I really wasn't trading tapes. I was buying tapes from other people, because I really didn't know anybody in Houston. Houston at that time wasn't like a big mecca of like diehard pro wrestling fans, at least the ones that I didn't know. Like in junior high, I think. Like literally, I think there were 20 people out of the 800 people I went to junior high with that were like into pro wrestling. And then as you get into high school, it like dwindles away, and you keep going like that, right? And so by the time like I was probably 20. Like there was me, and like I have one very good friend who's also in pro wrestling, but he's not the same type of wrestling fan that I am. And so I got on the internet and started, looking stuff up, and like everybody else, and like learning things and all of these things. And eventually, I started buying tapes, and U.S. wrestling was really bad at the time, so just seeing all of this other stuff that was out there and just kind of expanding, my pro wrestling stuff. And through that, of course, at the time, was also the rise of ECW. And it's very hard to explain ECW to people until now, actually, because ECW like came on the scene. It was so different from pretty much anything else. It was basically a promotion for all of the guys, and I would say guys mainly, um, who were made lifelong pro wrestling fans in the '80s, who were now probably in their 20s, who looked at the current products that they were given and were like, what is this? And then here's ECW, and ECW just spoke to everybody, right? And ECW had a connection to its fan base that very hard to explain. I never got to see the TV show like on TV. I had to wait until the tapes. And I would watch on the tapes. Barely Legal was the first, like not even like show that I ever saw that wasn't spoiled for me, right? It wasn't even that it was a live pay-per-view. Like, that was the first show I ever saw that was not spoiled for me. Like, I did not know what was going to happen going in. And so it's that's something to remember. Like, I remember being on the internet, in a chat room the night that they set up Barely Legal with Sabu and Taz, and everybody went crazy because, of course, everybody in that chat room was kind of diehard, understood the ECW story, and understood the story of Sabu and Taz, and so it was like a big freaking deal. And ECW, like, right as Barely Legal ended, it started to go down because of money issues, guys leaving, not being able to keep the talent that they had. Raven leaving was a big deal. I mean, there was just so much stuff that happened. And so we never really got to see what ECW could be, right? Then Friday happened, this last Friday, with CM Punk debuting, which was insane, right? Insane. We all knew it was like this great big moment, and it was like you felt good about being a pro wrestling fan, and it was all of these great and wonderful things. And it was like, but then it was like how many people actually watched, and all of those things. And then the ratings came out today. I don't have them in front of me, but doing what 1.1 million at here it'd be 9, but 10 o'clock Eastern in the U.S. is like ungodly, and they got like an insane demo number. I mean, it's just like if you go and you find the ratings, it's like ridiculous what they did. And the thing to remember, and this is something with AEW that people kind of forget, is that AEW has really, really high DVR numbers. Like people don't talk about it because it's not as important, but they have really high DVR numbers. Like, people that are really into AEW, if they don't watch it live, they're definitely, and they'll watch like the whole show. They're not just going to watch snippets of the show. That's a big part of it. And I think a big thing with the rating was that you have those diehard AEW fans that they weren't gonna miss this, and the return of CM Punk, and so we had arguably the biggest, not even arguably, it is the biggest night in AEW history. They got their second biggest rating, only behind their debut, and that was and this is on basically the A- show, I would say. They it's still an A show, but it's probably like an A- show because of the time slot. The fans didn't like drop off a cliff when after the CM Punk interview. They pretty much stayed, so it pretty much stayed over 1 million the entire time. I think it dipped under 1 million once, but it pretty much stayed. They had their biggest crowd to this point, and they had their biggest merch gate, which, if you know anything about AEW, that's a big freaking deal. Yeah, it was their biggest crowd, but that's a big deal for AEW because AEW does really well with merch. And then the CM Punk shirt, in 3 days becomes the biggest seller in Wrestling Tees history, which is insane when you think about like the Bullet Club shirts, right? And that shirt his shirt outsold like the Bullet Club shirts that were around for like a year, right? Insanity. It was the hottest seller in 24 hours. Like it broke every wrestling tees record there is, which is a feat in of itself. Pretty much everything about that show was a win. On top of the fact that in the main event, quote unquote, you had John Moxley taking on Daniel Garcia. And Daniel Garcia didn't win. It was a competitive squash for the most part, but Daniel Garcia looked good, and he looked like a guy on the rise, and you wanted to see more of him. And that's one thing AEW is so good at, is that making you want to see guys, even when they lose, you can see this is going to be a guy, this is going to be this is gonna, you can see it, and it makes everything seem so much better because you can just see everything going on. And they have the biggest night of their history, and they still have Daniel Bryan to come, and it looks like they're going to have Adam Cole coming, and blah blah, everything just seems to be lining up in a crazy way. And then, now I did not watch SummerSlam, so I will not talk completely about SummerSlam, but the Becky Lynch shit is insane to me. I really don't care that much, but it is crazy to me that apparently she's going to be a heel, as of right now. Now, come Friday, that might change. I am shocked it didn't change, like, Saturday. And it might change right now. They may, because we'll see what the rating will be on Wednesday. But if, let's say, they get another, let's say they get 400,000 more people watching, which is possible, given what happened on Friday, then they're going to be not that far from Raw in total, not just in the demo. And if they get that high, they're going to beat Raw in the demo. And it's even with coming off of SummerSlam. It's going to be crazy. And then, then we get to Becky Lynch, and it's like, oh, she's going to be a heel. And apparently, last thing I saw, and I don't know if this is true or not, it apparently was her idea, that she was tired of being a face, which, if she comes to me and she's like, I really don't want to be a face anymore, I'm like, you're just coming back. You don't want to be a face, that's fine, but let's wait until the Royal Rumble or WrestleMania. We can't be doing that now. You are, without a doubt, not just the most over woman, you are one of the most over people in the entire country, in the entire company, and we can't be turning you heel. We just can't be doing that. And apparently that's what they did. Not only that, they pretty much made Bianca Belair look like a total goof on top of it, which is like, why would you do that? You looked like you were making a star, even though from everything I've heard, not seen, but everything I've heard, it sounded like they were kind of stalling out on her because they don't know what to do with people. Unfortunately, they don't know how to make stars because you have an old man who has a vision of what he thinks a star is, and it's very evident of that, given the fact that he refused to get behind CM Punk. It'll be interesting to see if a lot of these fans, maybe not fans from like the Attitude Era, but fans that were fans 5 years ago, right, or 7 years ago, are like, hey, CM Punk's back, now I'm coming back. If him leaving really hit them hard, because it was like, he left, he was the chance, he was what we wanted, and it's evident we're not going to get what we want. And then you had the whole Bryan Danielson thing, and I think that became even a bigger deal. I think that became just a bigger nail in the coffin. And then when you look at like how everybody's used, how guys in NXT were used, the fact that NXT looks like it's going to be completely different now, it's really a tale of two companies, and it's very, very interesting to see, because the thing with WCW, and people like to compare, like when Nitro started and all this stuff, but what people forget is that when Nitro started, WCW was still shitty. We were still in the, Dungeon of Doom stuff was going on, and we were getting lots of other things, and then Hall and Nash show up, and then things kind of changed at that point. But it was, it wasn't this great and wondrous thing. It was, still kind of bad. And from the day that AEW really started, it wasn't like that. It was like, this is what the fans have wanted. We're going to give the fans what they want instead of what everyone has been told you have to give them. We're going to give them what they seem to want, and we'll see how it goes. And, the interaction between AEW and the fans is very ECW-like, to a point that it is kind of scary. And, and the thing is this is something that's been building for a long time. If you follow me on Twitter, I talked about the fact that I'm a huge Samoa Joe fan, so him staying with NXT, WWE, that kind of disappointed me, but there's more to it than that. I really hope at some point he gets to go to AEW, even if he doesn't wrestle, just to show up, because there needs to be a recognition, I think, by AEW. And I think AEW would do this because they seem like a company that would do this, where you recognize that Punk, Danielson, Joe, and Daniels, that those four guys, and you could add some other people to it. You could add Low-Key, and you could add Homicide, and you could add a few other people to it as well. But those four guys in particular really were the foundation to what built to allow AEW to exist. Without those four guys, I don't think AEW exists. I don't think we get, the first indie boom, which led to the second indie boom, which, pretty much led to, helping lead to the fact that we got what we got, and with AEW, and which led to, New Japan kind of becoming a big thing through the Young Bucks, and then people latching on, and then, Kenny Omega, and then you had Chris Jericho, and then it kind of just goes from there. And so there is that. And I also said that, I think Paul Heyman has kind of cast his die, but, and Nightmare Baller said this on Twitter as well after I said this. He said, basically, if Paul Heyman were to ever show up in AEW, it would be a massive moment, because it would kind of be him showing up. Because if CM Punk is like the god, or the saint of all of that, everything that people don't like about WWE, then Paul Heyman in a lot of ways is the god, is the guy, right? It's him showing up, him giving his stamp of approval would be like a complete geek out moment, I think, for most people. And it's very much just listening to the fans, right? And it feels great to me to see them doing so well, because Saturday as well, WWE announced they're going back to Saudi Arabia, and I have my thing is they don't have to go back to Saudi Arabia. They don't have. I get the money's there. It's a lot of money, all of this stuff, but they're not a business that has to deal with the Saudis. I'm very much a, hey, you help things through like free trade and sharing of ideas, but that's the other part of free trade is there's a sharing of ideas, there's a sharing of culture. You don't get that with the Saudis. It's you play by their rules or you don't play. And because they have so much money, it's like, well, then then they're going to, then a lot of industries are just forced to play because they don't have a choice. WWE has a choice. And then, we're going to go through this whole thing again with maybe we'll have one women's match. We'll have, when they go, we'll have like a Raw or SmackDown that is like all the women, and it'll be a woman heavy show. We probably won't get another pay-per-view, but it'll be sad in a lot of ways. And it's like the first chance they got, they went running back. And it's just, it's very just not okay. And people will say whatever they want about the cons, and I absolutely understand that. But the fact that they let, somebody on their TV show basically say, "Screw the Saudis," that should tell you kind of like, it is what it is. But yeah, it's the point of this is that it's very like AEW has picked up the torch of ECW that never went out. It was always there. It was always there, waiting for someone to pick it up and run with it. It was, TNA. I think understood that, but was never able to do it. Ring of Honor never had the money, and then when they had the money, they didn't have the people that understood that that's what they needed to do. And all of these things, and it is a really cool time to be a fan. I'm and hopefully when the world gets back to a semblance of normalcy, which we thought we were headed towards, and it looks like maybe a little bit, but not everywhere. We will see something really, really special. And yeah, I guess that's it. I've rambled for like 20 minutes about nothing really, but yeah, I mean, you got one company that absolutely listens to their fans. You have another company that basically looks at their fans as like, well, we can listen to them, but we don't have to listen to them. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure a lot of people in the comments, they're going to bring up WWE's con in the comments. And my thing with him is I really feel like he's playing kind of bad cop in a lot of ways on the WWE, and saying things that he knows will deflect things from like what's going on in the company, even though what he's talking about is basically what's going on in the company. Because let's face it, he probably doesn't know much about, it's a lot of on-the-job training when it comes to pro wrestling. And yeah, so I think that's part of this too. I think there's just so much going on, and it feels like this is a long time coming, that we're finally getting like the promotion that we've absolutely waited for. And with Punk, it's like, oh my God, is this the peak? And it's possibly not the peak, because we're going to get more, and we're going to get more, and we're going to get more, and there's so much more that could happen. And it is a great and wondrous feeling. And I will be completely honest, I have not been like this since ECW. I've not been like the leading up to Friday, leading up to Rampage. I had not felt like I hadn't been that excited about a wrestling show to that extent since One Night Stand. And One Night Stand holds like such a place for me as a fan. It's a completely dated show. I would not, if you go into that show thinking it's going to be this great and wondrous thing, it's not. It's something to see, don't get me wrong, and it's a spectacle. And I would tell you to just skip, just fast forward until the end of the Shane Douglas match. But that's the only one. Because everything else I think is worth seeing, and kind of seeing kind of how everything played out. And yeah. But anyways, I think I've rambled on long enough. Hopefully I made some sense on this. I don't know. But I know people are going to ask about another live stream. I'll probably start doing live streams Fridays after Rampage. I think that would be... That's a good time for me, I think. But anyways, I'm out. Have a good one.